of you that have been on these group healing webinars that I've done, we haven't had a guest, but this time it just presented so strongly. And Jeannie actually was the catalyst for reconnecting Caroline and I. And just so thankful for her for doing that. And Caroline is this amazing neurobiologist who is also an amazing seer and has had these visions of this neuro jewelry that she's created. You have to check out her website when the call is over. It's amazing, this in the way it works with the brain. It's just incredible. And because we're talking about today, we're talking about fear and anxiety that's on the planet, the idea to bring in someone who can actually help us, because she's incredible at explaining very complex scientific things so that anyone, if I can understand it, and it was fun learning some things about the brain from Caroline. So I'm just really honored to have her on this webinar with us, and she's going to add an element that I think you guys are going to really love. And so that's part of it. So say hi, Caroline. That's Caroline there. So what we're going to do is first, I'm just going to do a little overview of kind of like what people have been feeling and what's going on, a little update about the state of the world and the state of us as people who are often the kind of things that happen to us where we know that there's a bigger reason or an underlying reason why things are happening the way that they are. And because of that, we also can get really tapped into the fear and anxiety that's happening on the planet. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then I'm going to do this really cool process, which some of you who've worked with me, actually we've done the process before. This, just so you know, this isn't doing it again. This is an upgrade from what we've done before. So just know that this is like the next level of what we're going to do. And it's going to really help the brain manage all the input that's coming and help to kind of have us have more ease in our being, our whole being. So that'll be the second part. And then we're going to do have time for a Q&A at the end. Hopefully, as many people as possible, if you have questions, it can either be a personal thing that's going on for you that you want some clarity about, or I have a feeling there'll be some questions that you have for Caroline, because there's a lot of really cool information that she has about the brain and how we can work with it more effectively during this time that might be a little more challenging. And then, so we'll have that, and then any questions that don't get answered, you can go onto our Facebook group if you're on Facebook, and you can ask questions there, okay? So the first thing, we're going to talk about what is happening right now. So I don't know about you, but for me, it's definitely been waves. I can feel anxiety and fear like amplifying at times. And then other times it seems like, okay, we're getting to a new level of kind of acceptance that, okay, this is just where we're at. We're having to deal with all sorts of new ways of thinking about things, whether it's how we're communicating with our families or what we think our government is, whether it's doing a good job or a bad job, all of those judgments, listening to other people's fears and anxieties. And the most recent one was really interesting. And if you're not doing this already, this is a great, very simple thing to remind yourself. If you start feeling anxious or afraid about something, that either you heard something and are like, oh my God, how's that? Or if you are going through a really difficult time yourself, and if you have a computer and you're on this, or you have a phone and you're on this, you're probably more fortunate than most of the people on the planet that you have some options. But there are challenges for many. People have lost work or have lost loved ones. So it's not that this is a time where um, it's not affecting everyone in some way, right? But this latest thing, I did the thing that I always do when I start feeling that anxious or fearfulness or something, unsettled. The first thing I do is just ask if this is even mine. Is it my own anxiety that I'm feeling, or am I picking up on someone around me, or even bigger, the collective's fear and anxiety? And it's really important to practice doing this right now, because a lot of the time you'll find that it isn't even yours, that you're just sensitive to energy, even if you don't define yourself that way. If you're a sensitive person, if you get your feelings hurt easily, if you're, always kind of questioning yourself about, what you should be doing in the world, or those kinds of things, often that indicates more of an openness that you might have to other people's energy. So that's a really important piece that we ask. So I got to know that it wasn't mine at all. And when I felt into it, and asked for guidance about it, it was really like this new wave of fear that was rooted in people starting to recognize and let go of the idea that things were going to return to normal the way they were before. And even when people were saying that, oh, yes, we need this change, and I'm all for change, inside their being hadn't caught up with the idea of what that might actually look like, or how it might actually affect them. And this new wave that I was feeling it was really hitting people that, oh, no, it isn't going to be how it was before. This really is going to change everything, like permanently. We're not going back. It's not that some things might not be, similar or the same. It's not like every little tiny minutia of the way that we live, but overall, the feeling is we're not going back there. And so that was this new wave of us being called to accept that there are other options than the way that we've been living, and that we're going to have no choice but to ask those questions and to figure out ways to live in a new world. And I feel that most of the time the feeling is of excitement and how cool is this that we get to do this, right? So those of you that are on this call, that were drawn to this call, whether you remember it or not, there was a part of you at some point long before you incarnated in this physical body that knew you'd be here at this time for this very interesting thing that the earth is going through. And whether you agreed, whether you remember or not, whether you agreed to be of major assistance, where you're gonna, help large groups of people or be more public about it, or whether it's simply how you operate within your family and helping, if you have grandchildren or children, like what are you going to teach them that's going to assist them to move forward in a new way. So with that higher purpose, what does that fear and anxiety really do for us? Like why feel anxious if you know that, all right, this is a change, we're going to go through it, we're going to figure it out? Well, because there's a great unknown. Like we don't know exactly how it's going to unfold, right? And therefore it's hard to know what our peace is going to look like. And so it's that unknown that I know for me, I've been practicing that, not really consciously knowing that it was going to lead up to a time where like, well, it's a good thing you practice not getting comfortable with the unknown, because now look, here you go, big unknown, bigger unknown. And that is if you are someone who didn't realize that you're being trained for this time, on some level you were, we all were, to kind of expect the unexpected. And okay, so now what? So that's a little bit about what I've seen so far. And for today's webinar, I thought this technique that I was shown several years ago, what it does is and this is where Caroline is going to explain it even further, but in extremely lay terms, this is how I was shown. Okay. And then we're going to turn it over to Caroline and have her explain it before we actually do the process. So you're walking around in your life and something happens, like we'll talk about, something like there's a crazy person running around the street with a knife, and you realize they're starting to run towards you, and you're like, oh, I better run. And you get out of there, and you're the reptilian part of your brain, which is the oldest part of your brain. It's your fight and flight survival response that kicks in, and it does what it has to do to get you out of danger. And that's a good thing, right? We need that. We're not trying to get rid of that. But what my guides told me I was going to do, I was actually speaking at a conference where you offer something like a special. And I tuned in and my guide said, you're going to offer reptilian brain bypass surgery. And I just laughed and said, what? I'm not going to stand up on stage and say that. Now, it was a pretty, kind of new agey crowd. So I knew that they wouldn't go, oh, but it just sounded silly, like I'm not like digging in there and doing brain surgery, but am I? Well, maybe I am. Maybe that is what it is. And it is on some level. So what all it means is that when something like that happens and we're in true danger, we want that part of the brain to kick in and help us stay safe. But the problem is, in our modern world, there's not actually that many times where we need to operate from that level. And in our modern world, our brain, we're so smart that we're constantly thinking up scenarios and making up stuff about how things could be dangerous or potential dangers, or thinking about the past when that thing felt dangerous. And so we've got this constant mental chatter making that part of the brain active. And so we're running on adrenaline. So then what happens? Along comes this virus, and along comes all of these news outlets, just amplifying all of the worry and the fear and the uncertainty. And the brain starts going, trying to figure out what to do with the information. Should I be afraid? Should I, maybe I shouldn't even, look outside my window. And we end up walking around like this. And then, for probably many of you on this call, you have techniques and you know how to meditate, come back to center, remember, what is actually true, and that you're not in real danger. But a lot of people don't have that. And even if you do have those techniques, I can pretty much guarantee that any of you that are listening to this have had moments where you went, and you had that fear activation response when you heard something, or when you saw something, or when someone told you a story about someone who died, and then, you pulled yourself back into your more centered place and was able to calm down. So what this reptilian brain bypass does, from a very lay person's view, is that it takes that information. We're going to talk to the reptilian part of the brain and let it know, like, everything's okay. We still need it to do its thing. But then we're going to work with the higher levels of consciousness that are connected directly to source, and your heart is the third part. And just do this rerouting so that the reptilian brain knows what its job is. And if it is not needed, it will just revert to your higher levels of consciousness, which means that you can assess things more quickly. You can assess things from a place of calm and not react, be more responsive. So does that sound good? You can just nod your head if that sounds good to you. And again, for those of you that have gone through that process with me, this is an upgrade that we're going to do, especially with Caroline here doing some explaining. It's not just the scientific information that she's going to share with you, but this is also going to be part of the process of helping your brain to understand how to operate within the system. So I want to turn it over to you, Caroline, now.
Oh.
And so what's happening from a neurobiologist standpoint when we're in all of this fear? Like, what have you been seeing?
Well, first of all, Sherryl, thank you for bringing me in. This is going to be so much fun. And you talk up the scientific side of me, which is fine, but I tend to use analogies, and that's how I tend to move through the process of explaining the science. So my first analogy that came to me is, and people use reptilian brain all the time, which is fine. But to me, I look at it more like, and it'll put it in context when I go through this process, I promise you. I actually look at it as almost like a 3-tiered wedding cake. Okay, so you have the base layer, which is the first brain. Now, you absolutely need that. People call it reptilian because it was the first. It was the first brain that we evolved to, that enabled us to breathe, it enabled our heart rates, it enabled to monitor your hormonal situation, it monitored all of our digestion. We're not even thinking about breathing, and yet it absolutely is required. That has to work intact. And also, it's also involved in movement and fine motor skills, and also large motor skills. And that is absolutely vital to our survival. We evolved awesomely because we had that in place. So that was our first foundational layer, and we absolutely needed it. So we needed to be able to, get our heart rate up and get our breathing up when we had to run away from the saber-toothed tiger, right? We had to understand if we needed to shelter in place in a cave because the marauding tribes were trying to beat us up, We needed to have all of those things in place for us. So it's absolutely vital. And then we had the second tier of the cake, which was the next tier, which I will talk about in a little bit. And that's where we started to evolve into having a lot of memory and learning. So we knew that bush with those berries wasn't such a good thing to eat anymore. That wasn't good for our survival. But we had to have foundations put on top of the first tier to enable us to remember that and then utilize those skills so that we would be able to move forward and evolve even further. And then we had the third tier, which is where our higher consciousness, our social learning, all of that higher skill set was put into place. So we have these amazingly interactive layers that we have evolved. Now, we have evolved in such a way that we utilize that higher consciousness, that logical, that learning, that interpretation, that evaluation to make decisions about what we want to do. Sometimes we overthink everything, and we use all of that experience and we use all of that learning, but we bring it down to our first brain in such a way that it absolutely doesn't add any value for us, because we overthink something and we think a situation is much more fearful than we actually really know. And we're bombarded with all this information all the time. So we come back down to the first brain because it's trying to figure out what the hell to do with all of that connectivity and all of that information through the memories of what we know to be true or what we don't know to be true, and then tapping into all the information that we are integrating and learning as it comes back down to the first brain, right? So we, bless us, but sometimes we overinterpret by taking too much information from the top and bringing it back down, right? So when we hear things that we don't understand, when we look at things, when we're bombarded with information that we just don't necessarily know about, that all comes down and it integrates all the way down to the base. So then we have this overwhelming sense of, oh my God, I have to run away, or oh my God, I have to hide, or oh my God, my heart has gone up. Because we have that circuitry that is put in place to enable us to be successful, but sometimes it's a little too successful for us. I don't know if that makes sense to people, but that's one of the things that occurred to me, that you have to acknowledge it's not just one region of the brain. We absolutely, in that first brain, that is our foundational support. We need all of that, but we have evolved above and beyond the capacity to interpret things as not required to run away from, if that makes any sense. So the first brain has a co-conspirator, and that co-conspirator actually is called the amygdala. And the amygdala is associated with that second level, that second tier of the cake. And it has interactions with all of our memory and all of our learning skills, but it has a very close interaction with the first brain as well. So the first brain and the second communicate very much. And as I was talking about, that second tier has a lot of the memory, and it remembers stuff, and it is probing. It's always looking out. It is always figuring out whether or not everything is safe in its interpretation of what that really is. So the amygdala interacts and evaluates the surroundings, and it's taking information through the top tier that it's reading in the news, or and it's taking that information and it's interpreting it. And bless it, sometimes it just goes a little nuts. And then it says, first brain, get the hell out of Dodge, or first brain, hide away, because this is not good, right? And then if you find skills that are able to say, love you, amygdala, love you to death, but really that's a little overinterpretation. Appreciate what you're doing here, but I'm now aware of that. And disconnect that informational pathway that's coming from the frontal cortex, the higher reasoning, the big cauliflower bit on the front, in the top of your brain, that is taking all of the information from the outside and working it through with the amygdala. And we have two of them, one on either side of our brain, that's basically sussing out what's going on in the environment, and then bringing it down and interpreting it to the first brain to say whether or not it needs to run away, whether it needs to hide, or what it needs to do, which when increases our heart rate. And so there's a circuitry that is going on all the time, that we're not always aware of. And sometimes in order to evaluate what to do with that information, there's a part of the amygdala and the hippocampus and the memory and learning section that enables you to remember and acknowledge the fear that is associated with it, and accept it, and then move on. Say, love you, but that's not needed. And so that enables a disconnection that then the amygdala no longer tells our brains, our first brain, to get to run, or to feel the fear, or to feel the heart rate, or to feel the anxiety around it. So that's a very, it's a well-documented wiring system. The brain is exquisite in that it's all interconnected. It's not one element. So you have to embrace all of the aspects of what is going on with all of the connections that are coming down through the system. right?
Cool.
And if you're very open to this, you're going to feel that it's going to calm from higher levels through the frontal cortex, through the auditory cortex, whatever. It's going to come through and then come back down to the base layer. I don't know if that helps people understand some of this.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you for that. I love the connection that you made between the amygdala and the first brain, because I think that has that's the part that, you know, we really need to address with this bypass.
Exactly.
Is that we're saying, yes, do your job and protect us from danger, but we're going to give you a new interpretation system, a new way to interpret it.
And we need it, Cheryl. It's absolutely vital. I mean, we have become the species that we are simply because we have all of these mechanisms in place to enable us to constantly be vigilant.
Yeah.
Sometimes, unfortunately, with our society, where it becomes over vigilant. The brain also, to remind, just to let you know, the brain doesn't its neuronal firing is irrespective of whether it's real or perceived. To a neuron, it fires when it has to. It doesn't have to be a real event. And so that circuitry can fire even though it might not be necessary. And so to try and understand and to rewire that in such a way that you can go, is that real? Is an active decision that one has to make. You can't expect the brain to go, oh, that's not real, I'm just going to forget about it. It's never going to do that. It's going to do it because it's happening, whether it's real or perceived. And so to have an awareness of that and to then enable it to rewire or the circuitry to modify has to be a physiological or an emotional decision point for people.
That's very cool. And that you just described what the upgrade is going to be, because I wasn't sure what the upgrade was going to be, but you just described it. So here's what the upgrade is. And we're going to do the process, and then we're going to, in the Q&A, we'll have more time to talk with Caroline and get more information about this. So what the upgrade is, it's so cool. As you were talking, I was like, oh, cool. So as we're doing this for us individually, we're also doing it for the planet. If you can kind of see the Earth as its own brain, like it's just like, you know, our individual brains, that the Earth with all of its tributaries and all of the information channels and the electrical currents and everything, it's the same as our brain. And as we do this, what we're going to be doing, so if you see yourself and you get some information that's upsetting, it's kind of like it pokes that part of it pokes your amygdala that starts going, okay, I have to interpret, oh, emergency, right? It's the same what's happening on the planet right now, and why we're feeling that amped up anxiety and fear is because the planet is getting poked in that same way with all of the people's individual fears, with things literally going through the fear being passed through the airwaves of conversations people are having on social media or on their phones or watching the news. And so actually in the airwaves around the planet is also all of this incorrect information. Incorrect meaning it may be a danger somewhere, but it's not a danger to the entire planet. Just like when we hear of something horrible happening, and it's like it's not in our house, it's not in our neighborhood, it's not in our physical body, but we feel it as if it's happening to us. And that is part of what the amplification is. And so we're going to address that at the same time. So this is not just for our own rewiring, but this is also planetary. So just know you're taking one for the big team in doing this. So let's start the process. So what I'd love everyone to do is just close your eyes. And just wherever you are, as much as possible, hopefully you're free from distraction, but just do the best you can. Close your eyes and just start noticing your breath, breathing in and out. And as you're noticing your breath, just any thoughts that you've been having about what we're talking about, anything, that might have been distracting you before on this call, anything that might be worrying you, just let it fade into the background of your consciousness. If you can just imagine that behind you, there's like a shelf up on the wall, and you're just putting all the extraneous stuff that's floating around in your head up on that shelf, just for the purposes right here, right now, being fully present. Very good. And now just feel, right now we are so blessed with everyone that showed up on this call, whether you're listening live or to the replay. We are so blessed to gather together, not just with our human self who's sitting in a chair or standing listening to this or riding in a car, but also all of our connections to our higher levels of consciousness, whatever, however you see those higher levels, God, spirit, angels, guides, and just feel our collective cosmic support team right here with us, just assisting with this upgrade, this clearing, this activation of a new way for all of us, and how that is going to ripple out to everyone we come in contact with, ripple out across the planet. Very good. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, and just know that in the words that I speak are contained the activation of the truth of what is happening in your physical, emotional, and spiritual body. So we're first going to speak to that part of the brain, that first layer, the reptilian brain. And we're just letting it know you are not out of a job. We really need you to continue to work with the amygdala. And when you get the information that there really is a true danger to either your physical being, like our example of some being chased and we need to run, and also our emotional well-being, where someone maybe is speaking to you in an unkind way, and that part of the brain will kick in and help you move away from whatever that is. Leave the room, say that's enough, whatever it needs to do. So just letting that part of the brain know you are an integral part of this process. And then next, we're going to go into the pineal gland, which is, your third eye, your connection to your higher levels of consciousness, your direct connection to knowing truth. No intermediaries required, no angels or ascended beings. This is your direct connection from your pineal gland to source, the source of all knowing that you are always connected to. And I'm just going to go in right now to the pineal gland and just do a little clearing. It's always good to, when we have the opportunity, to just do a little decalcification. And the pineal gland gets calcified. They've actually proved that calcification happens scientifically with things like fluoride, is something that actually causes calcification of the pineal gland. But it also, in a more spiritual essence of it, is that every time you don't trust yourself, trust your own knowing, trust your gut instincts, it does something to the pineal gland. It's like it gets crusty from lack of use. So I'm just going in. You might feel a little tingly in the center of your head if you were to draw a line from between your eyebrows to the center of your brain, and then from the top of your crown down where those meet approximately. I'm sure Caroline will give us the exact location later, but approximately that's where your pineal gland is. You might feel a little tingly in there as I'm clearing away the calcification and raising the vibration to expand your ability to connect to that direct source. And then if you can imagine from your pineal gland right through the crown of your head, as far as you can imagine, because it's really, there's not an actual location. It's like into the all, into the beyond, the great beyond. Imagine that connection to your highest source of wisdom, where you just know, like you know, like you know. And we're just clearing that channel of any debris. If you can imagine a very clear tube going from that point up to your higher levels of knowing. And then we're just bringing through this effervescent liquid, kind of like champagne, to just clear that channel. No interference with your direct knowing. That will just help open that up. Very good. So now the second part of the process, the information comes in, you're exposed to something, the reptilian part of the brain looks at it along with the information that's getting from the amygdala and says, is this a danger or not? If the answer is yes, it does its job and it protects you. But if the answer is no, it's going to immediately default to that direct seat of knowing, your pineal gland, and right up to your highest level of consciousness, so that the information that you get about what's really happening will tell you whether or not there's anything you need to do, any action you need to take, and just bring a sense of clarity. Very good. Okay, so that's the first leg of it. And then the other part is your heart. So right now, just feel in the center of your chest, in your heart chakra. Just feel this warm glow for a moment as we're just focusing energy there. And when you see things through the eyes of your heart, if the heart had eyes, you will know whether it's coming from love or not. The heart will assess, is this information I'm receiving coming from a place of love? Will this bring me closer to love or push love away? Is what I'm about to say coming from love? Is what this person is about to tell me or is telling me, is that coming from love? So the heart plays a beautiful part in this triad. So that is the heart's job, to assess further the information coming in. So now we're going to just work on that triad, really activating it. The information comes in to your being in whatever form. It goes first to that first part of the brain in the amygdala, communicating that information back and forth and back and forth. And is the answer yes, true danger? And if it is, it does what it needs to do to protect you. If the answer is no, it immediately defaults to your higher knowing and your heart, that beautiful triad. We're just creating a new pathway where these three pieces work together within you to help you properly assess what's happening around you. And then out, just if you can just kind of see that triad, and however that looks to you, however that feels to you in your being, we're just going to expand that awareness that we're all having right now, out, letting it ripple out across the whole planet right now. And seeing all that information flying around the planet, not judging whether it's good or bad, just seeing it as all information. And allowing the energy of the planet and all the people on the planet to recognize that the deepest truth often does not come from the human brain, that the human brain is constantly interpreting it, but that this activation that we just did will raise the vibration of the consciousness of the people that are on the planet, so that when those triggers are flying around and poking at everyone to panic, to be in fear, to have anxiety rule the day, that there's an awareness. Not everyone's going to know what it is they're feeling, but like, something's not right here. I know that fear, if I go into fear, it's not going to actually help. So it's that awareness that we're amplifying. If I come from love, if I come from a higher awareness, what would that look like? How could I be more helpful to others? How could I be calmer within myself? Just feel that awareness just rippling out across the planet right now. Very good. Beautiful. So this was not just I think most of you on this call will know this, but this is not just a little story we told, but this actually, we actually went into our physical bodies and the planet and actually shifted things. So I would love to just for a minute or two, Caroline, if you want to add anything that you saw, or you can help us understand about how that actually can shift us. And then and you can start, if you want to post questions in the chat, if there's questions that came up. Again, if you're having something personal, or if you have a question about kind of what we just did or the science of it all. So just take a few deep breaths, everyone. Come back to your body. Come back into the room where you are, or wherever you are. Just be present with us here. Very good. Caroline.
I remember when I was doing developmental neurobiology at one point, there is a very small window in development where the developing brain actually bows to the developing heart. So they actually have, right from very, very early, a connection that is manifest always. So the fact that the heart can often enable aspects of the brain is valid, even from a early developmental perspective. Wow. So that's what came to me. I remember watching that and thinking how beautiful that actually physical bowing and connection between the two before they separated and went their own way. And it's at the same time that you start to have development of the first brain. So of course, it all ties in.
Yeah, that is so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
They bow to each other. It's
Yes.
Like honoring within our being as we're yes. becoming human.
And it's one of the first things that becomes obvious as conception moves beyond a ball of cells. You actually see that very early as the heartbeat starts to come on and the brain starts to develop. Wow, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. Wow. So how was that for everyone? What did you notice as you're going into your own brain system, and did you feel the vibrations? Were you aware of how your brain has been operating on fear, even if you don't realize it? So I'd love to see that in the chat.
Or actually, also, if anyone wants to raise their hand, we can unmute you if you want to actually talk rather than type. We can do that as well.
Chat disabled.
So Caroline, I was thinking also about, while we're waiting for people to see if they have any questions. I was, as we were doing this, I was thinking about the amygdala as it's interpreting all this information, and it's sending the information to us, to the reptilian part of the brain. How does it act when it's like coming from a calm place? Like, is it very analytical? Is it like a kind of a, like, how does it normally operate when it's not coming from?
When you think about when we're feeling calm physically, right? Everything seems balanced. Everything seems nothing, you're not aware of anything really that's amiss, right? Your heart is not bothering you. You're not feeling your heart out your chest. You're not feeling like you're breathing, shallow breathing. You're not feeling like you're ready to, and so the amygdala likes it best when it doesn't have a job, which is to alert us of anything. So it becomes calm and just monitoring and vigilant, but it doesn't feel like it needs to ring any alarm bells. And so it's reflective of when we don't physiologically feel activated. So it's very much in alignment with how we feel physiologically.
Cool.
And so actually what's happening is, the amygdala, because it's connected to a lot of the memory and learning stuff, it actually enables us to open up and embrace other aspects of that whole system, because it doesn't have to work hard. Its neurons aren't firing. It doesn't have to do any activations. And so it allows us to use other parts of the brain that maybe would not be engaged if it had to deal with something. If it's not focusing on that, it can focus on something else.
Cool. Very cool. The relaxed brain part.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Sometimes, it's like when you're feeling relaxed physiologically, therefore your brain is relaxed. Sometimes things come to you, like when you're in a calm situation. I have a think tank, that's my hot tub, because it calms my whole physiology down, and then suddenly things come to me from high, I go, oh really, oh okay, because everything else is calm, and the amygdala plays a huge role in that too.
And I think that that's part of what that, from when I was shown that reptilian brain bypass, that is what it does. It just calms it down. There was, Jeannie saying that someone had unmuted, but so there was someone that had a question. Was it Susanna? Susanna, are you? Let me unmute you.
You can unmute and talk to me. I like it better that way.
There you go. Hi, Susanna.
Hi. I just wanted to say I'm sorry I fell asleep during the whole visualization.
Totally cool. Nothing to be sorry about.
I've been doing that ever since we arrived here. We just moved from Florida to New York last week.
Oh.
But at the same time, I found out that my sister had the virus.
Oh, wow.
Just a few days before that. She's over it now. So it's been a really intense time, and now we're staying with a relative and we don't have a place to live yet. So that's where I'm at.
Nothing small, right?
No, nothing small. And I don't have, what is your hot tub, Caroline? Used to be my bed, and I don't have that now. We're sleeping on an air mattress. And I would just lay down on my bed in the middle of the day and stuff would come to me. And I don't have a space like that right now. And I'm just like, I don't know where to get this peace.
Well, sometimes like going out and sitting in the car
Oh, it's too cold.
Oh,
It's
that's
too
right.
cold.
You're in New York. Yeah, we are having kind of a cold spell here. Susanna just moved actually closer to me. So once the quarantine,
Yeah.
we actually will get to visit. Um, yeah, well, I
But
think,
I'm glad I feel a little more relaxed now.
yeah, and you can listen to the recording too if you,
Yeah, I will
I
do
think,
that.
I think we've done the reptilian brain bypass, but this was an upgrade. So I think you and I did do that at one point. But yeah, I'm glad you're here and you made it. And yeah, thank you. Anyone else have a question? You can unmute yourself. Oh,
Govinda.
Roberto Govinda.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you. Caroline started out by saying that we have the brain is like a three-tier cake, and she addressed two pretty well. Do we need to address the third?
Well, thank you. I tend to like to use analogies because I'm very visual. That's probably why I do the jewelry, but it just makes it easier for me. So I'm really glad that it resonated with me too.
Did everyone get that? It was a little funny.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm gonna mute you, Robert. Oh, you are muted. So can you repeat what you said, Caroline, again? It was
I'm a very visual person. That's probably why I do the jewelry. But I use analogies because it just works for me on how I can explain things because I'm so visual. So if it resonated for you, I really do appreciate that. And you know, if you ever have any specific questions or any of that, just contact.
I think what he was asking was about the first you know, you were talking about the two, you talked about 2 layers, but you didn't talk that much about
the third one.
Yeah,
oh,
the third one.
The third one is awesome, and I can, if you want me to, I can talk about it a bit more. It's up to you, Sherryl.
Well, that was his question.
Okay, so I can do a little bit. So the third element is the last, the most highly evolved component for us. And I don't know if when you look at images of the brain, it's that kind of like cauliflower like visual that you see sitting on top of the brain. That's actually almost like a layer that's actually put over the top of the brain. And it's layered like this because it is so rich in neuronal connections and information gathering. And it basically brings higher consciousness or more a social consciousness much more to us. So tribal elements, the community, right or wrong, social justice, some of the logic and the higher reasoning and the interpretation of information will come from that very neuronally rich, neuronally dense information. There's also a lot of visual information and auditory information that we take in and interpret through the frontal cortex and the auditory cortex as well, that comes down and then provides information to the rest of the other brain sections. So it is actually more of a, I wrote down here actually, ironically, it's more around the social networking and the community and how to be in a community in a way that's very tribal. But it's also massive amounts of interpretation, and it takes in information globally and interprets it in a way that is defined by how our learning is as we develop. Usually that all comes online later in our lives, but that's where that whole social conscience and community comes into play, if that makes any sense. You good?
Just give me a thumbs
Thank you,
up.
Cheryl, for clarification.
Yeah. So we have a question on the chat from Jen. Are the protesters wanting to open up everything again, which I find so sad, working just from the reptilian brain, and what can we do individually? You know, it's an interesting thing, you know, because we think everyone has a different interpretation of what's happening, okay? As many people as there are on the planet, because each of our operating systems is slightly different because we're unique individuals, right? And so what one person thinks, like you said, it was really sad that people were wanting to open things back up. But the person that's feeling that way doesn't think it's sad at all. They think it's sad that everything got shut down. And there are people that have belief systems all the way from, you know, people should die of this so that there's more for everyone else, all the way from that to people who are like, you know, this is made up, right? And everything in between. So I think the thing to do, and this is part of, you know, what addressing fear and anxiety in us, is to keep focused on what is ours to do. Because otherwise you end up getting overwhelmed by hearing stories like that. You start thinking, oh my God, I've got to, like, if it's really calling to you to do something about it, or you feel powerless to do anything about it, you walk around again feeling all this anxiety, when perhaps that's not your particular thing to address, even if it's upsetting you, but there may be something else that is calling you to make a difference. And it might be in large or small ways. I think it's really important that we kind of look at what is ours to contribute right now, what is ours to take care of within ourselves. You know, I know for a lot of people, it's a very personal awakening to, oh my God, what have I been doing with my life? You know, like I have to reassess some things. It's like a big deal. And that is not to ignore things that are upsetting to us, but just to keep asking yourself, is there something in this for me to do? It could be like, some people are really good at disseminating information. Like you hear about things and you're just someone who's good at presenting a certain viewpoint to those who need that information. And there's nothing wrong with that. Whether other people judge it as good or bad, it doesn't matter. If that's yours to do, that's what you do. And other people, you know, love to protest and be a rabble rouser and, you know, and work in that way. And if that's yours to do, then that's what you do when faced with something like that. But it's important not to because there's lots of bad news out there that you could really walk around constantly in fear. And it's really important not to let that derail you. And again, just keep coming back to what's mine to address, you know. So I hope that helps, Jen. Thumbs up. Good. Okay, so we're at time right now, so we can do a few more questions if people want to stay on afterwards. Jeannie, are you okay with just a little bit longer? Okay, and Caroline as well. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. But anyone that needs to go, I just want to mention a few things before, you know, so that we formally close, and then if you want to continue to ask some questions. First of all, we have this awesome Facebook group that in 1 week 500 people joined, and it's now over 700, and it's really a great place to share information. And the purpose of it is not to amplify fear, but it's amplify love, which is how some of you heard about this webinar. So you can go on there and ask questions. Just where we posted about the webinar, you can ask questions right on there. And if it's a question for Caroline, I'll make sure that she has that as well. And I am going to, I keep being told I am going to do more of these complimentary webinars right now, because it seems to be really helpful for people. And I also, for those of you who do want to make a contribution, a donation, you can do that through my website. But it's absolutely not required. And then if you haven't been on my website, it's thecosmicconduit.com. And there you'll find more about working one-on-one with me. I'm offering some more affordable ways to work during this time when, you know, for some people there's a lot of financial hardship. So if we're meant to work together, we'll find a way to do that. And I'm going to give a formal thank you right now to Caroline for being with us and providing some wonderful clarity about how the brain works and how we can use it more effectively. I so appreciate you being on here and for us connecting.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I think we're going to be hearing more from Caroline going forward. And go to her website. It's carolineemmett.com, right?
Yes.
And just take a look at some of this amazing jewelry that she makes that's based on the neurology of the brain. It's really cool. So with that, those of you that are still here, there's some people that had unmuted. Leslie, are you?
Yes. It was actually you've just mentioned it, Caroline. It's about your jewelry. I remember being out in Mount Shasta, and it hadn't been long when I'd actually got Lyme disease, and my cognition was affected at the time. And now you let me wear a piece of jewelry for a whole day, and the effect on my brain, I just kept going around telling everybody about this jewelry, because honestly it just seemed to waken up something in my brain, and I didn't know whether you could have spoken a bit about how that actually worked, because it was just such an amazing piece of jewelry.
Well, Leslie,
as well as a beautiful. Yeah, so I don't know whether I had time to just mention how that worked, or
yeah, if you want to briefly describe why your jewelry is magical, Caroline.
I can't explain that. All I know is that I'm guided to make pieces of jewelry that are inspired by cells and structures of the brain, and I go with that guidance, and then what happens is these pieces, when I manifest them, they're exactly, I have someone who actually translates this stuff for me, and it's exactly what I envisage when I see something. And then I feel that these different cells and representations, everybody has different aspects that they resonate with. And there was a certain cell that Leslie went straight to, and I just knew that it was something that Leslie should wear for a while. The fact that this happened for her, I'm just so grateful. But all I'm doing is manifesting what I'm guided to make. And so I have different neuronal cells and different structures from the brain, and people resonates differently for different folk, and must be a cosmic reason why they go with that. And the fact that it can conduit for enabling something positive for someone, I think that's absolutely fabulous. Do I do anything? No, I just go, okay, I'm ready to make this, and I make it. So that I appreciate that a lot. Thank you, Leslie.
Caroline is a very powerful channel, even if she might not call herself that. Channel for creative neuro.
Which is as a trained neuroscientist is a bit like,
both sides of the brain, right?
Yeah.
So Susan had raised her hand. Are you still here, Susan, or did she?
She had left already.
Oh, she left. Okay.
But Alana has her hand up, and so does Tanya Lennox.
Okay, so Alana.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have never really fully recovered from the PTSD that showed up in 1991, but I found a way to sort of manage it. And then yesterday and today, I felt like I was regressing back into that, which is why I got on the call today. I'm hoping that after the activation today that my brain will be functioning with less of a PTSD kind of pattern.
Yeah, it definitely, I can see, Alana, that it assisted, and I'm so glad that you got on the call. That was your higher level saying, get you some help. Here you go. Let me just quickly just kind of take a look and see if there's anything else. There is, the story that your amygdala is telling your first brain is an old one, right? That's what happens with
Right.
PTSD. It like just keeps running this tape, and there's an opportunity for you to, and I'm just going to say this, the words themselves are going to contain the activation of the truth for you. And this is for everyone, really. So there is the reality that we've lived or are living, this life that we're living. We're sitting or lying down, and we're communing with each other on this, in this method. And there's all sorts of interpretations about this. But if you can imagine that a hair's width away from this reality that we're perceiving are other realities, other dimensions of our being, other dimensions of our reality. And in this reality, that the things that happened to you in the past are not happening right now, because it's not like you have the expanded awareness. And just knowing that other dimension of interpretation exists, where it's much clearer and you're not dragging along all your past experiences. It's just a clear, this is how it is. And that already happened. It doesn't exist anymore. Just me saying this to you is part of what will open that up in you, that knowing that you're totally capable of it, stepping into another dimension of your being where that does not exist. Okay.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Cheryl,
Send me an email and let me know what you feel over the next few days. Like, wait a few days for that to just kind of settle into your being, and then drop me an email, Alana. I'd love to hear how that filters out. Caroline, you had something?
It's also, as I was talking about before, in the second tier, the second layer, the amygdala has conversations with the memory aspects of our minds too. And so sometimes it takes memories and interprets those in a way that's not necessarily positive for us. So there's an aspect and a connection there that is not always productive, and will set that circle, that wiring circle, that is not positive for us either. So to have that disconnecting to a certain degree, and allowing the amygdala to calm and not take those memories and interpreting them poorly, will also be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Caroline.
Very cool. Okay, and then there was, I forgot who the other person was that you said.
Tanya.
Oh, Tanya.
Okay, I'm unmuted, and I'm going to try and find the wording for the question, because I can feel it, but I got to get it worded so Carolyn can respond, and you, Cheryl. So when we are heart-centered, we know there's a connection between the heart and the brain. So when we actually come and are fully aligned and sitting in our heart, and we are responding from the place of, what would love do? There may be all the fear and anxiety that we're aware of that's out there, but from that place where we're right in our heart space, really connected to the essence of who we are. In the brain, as we are in the brain, are we at that point in a way bypassing the reptilian brain in the sense of how we are now choosing to respond, because we're responding rather than reacting? Is that making sense?
Perfect, because as I was saying, in the first brain has a tremendous role to play in managing the activity of our hearts. in that it manages the heartbeat, it manages the pulse, it manages all of the aspects of the physiology of the heart. If the heart is calm, then that part of the first brain is also calm, and it's monitoring and saying, okay, it's going to be all right. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to increase my heart rate so that I can fight or fly. I'm good. And so if that is a very, very strong connection between, and actually the heart and there's a certain area, I don't want to do too much neuroscience, but there's a ganglia, within the basal ganglia, there's a system that is absolutely intimately related with heart and heart rate. And so if you have a calm heart, you'll have a calm basal ganglia, i.e. your first brain will be calm from that aspect. So you're exactly right, Tanya.
Okay. So it comes right back again to, you know, the power of living in our hearts, the power of that alignment, and all the tools, the various tools that we can have, such as gratitude or hugging a tree or a walk in nature, but just how important it is to come back to that place of heart-centered living. And I've been really drawn lately, you know, that it's also, we're being called on a very large scale to come back to really love ourselves, because in that place where we are really loving ourselves, we're also calming the brain too, right? It's like, because I feel like it's so easy to have gratitude for what's outside of us. I have gratitude, you know, I have food, I have a home to live in. I'm gratitude, maybe I still have a job, or I've still got some income coming in. There's lots of ways, but I feel like we're being really called to have so much gratitude for ourselves and self-appreciation, which as a whole we're not really taught in society to do. No. But I feel that call to do that, and as I feel that, I really feel that that's doing things in our brain as well.
Absolutely. And actually, so it's a knock-on effect. Okay, so if the heart is working, and because obviously the first brain is also monitoring the hormones in our blood, and if we're feeling calm and our hormones are calm and we don't have adrenaline pumping through them, so we're not flooding our brain with stress hormones, then that collectively bathes the brain in a more calming influence. So they're directly linked.
Okay, awesome.
And also, Tanya, to add, when you're talking about the living from the heart and gratitude, you're not just doing it for your own body, but everyone you come in contact with, and planetarily, you're contributing to the uplifting of the planet. That's
absolutely.
That's the whole Amplify Love thing.
Yeah, yeah, the whole uplifting of uplifting of humanity. Yeah, and the earth. Yeah. Anyway, Sherryl, it was awesome. Thank you.
You are welcome.
And thank you also. Oh my God, I get in the spot and names are really.
Caroline.
I was just talking. Caroline, thank you very much.
It's okay, my love.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got a piece of jewelry that I'm going to be designing for you, so I'll be talking to you soon.
Yeah, I know. Just waiting for the time to be right in the finances.
So, Jen is saying, are you aware, Caroline and Sherryl Lin, of Heart Math, organization with quantitative data? Yeah, it's an amazing organization. And
so you see why there's such a connection, right? It makes so much sense, because we're not, that's the other thing. I know the brain, okay, I know a little bit about the brain, but it's all connected. And then, of course, anything, when this is all connected, it also connects out. So, of course, it all makes sense, right? To me, it does anyway.
Very good. So any last questions that you have before we close?
Yeah.
I don't see any. Sorry, I'm very good. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jeannie, for managing our chat and just being so much love and assistance. And maybe can we unmute everyone and have a big cacophony of goodbyes? Unmute all. Oh, I see it.
Thank
Bye.
you.
guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Love you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.